It started with a glass of wine and a promise. 8 months ago, Elena Marlowe sat across from Damien Cross, the CEO of Orion Labs, in a rooftop lounge overlooking downtown Seattle. He swirled his glass thoughtfully, then smiled. If your team delivers on what you pitched, you've got yourself a legacy contract, Elena. Not just a win. A legacy. That was the night everything changed. And that was the night Elena began the long journey that would end with betrayal, collapse, and the beginning of her empire. Elena had spent 15 years climbing the ranks of high-stakes tech sales. As a senior executive at Nexera Dynamics, her portfolio boasted over 100 major clients and more than 30 million in revenue brought in under her name. But none of that compared to what she was about to land. The Orion Labs contract, valued at over $2.5 million, was the crown jewel. A deal that would pay off her mother's hospital debt, finally allow them to upgrade her care, and maybe, just maybe, give Elena the courage to walk away and start the consulting firm she'd always dreamed of. But fate never plays fair. It was a quiet Friday afternoon, almost 4 o'clock, when she was called into Bryce Kettering's office. He was the new vice president of sales, imported by Nexera's recently installed CEO, Raymond Lowell. Bryce didn't look her in the eye. That was the first warning. He just slid a letter across the glass table and said, "We're restructuring your division. Your position is being eliminated, effective immediately." Elena stared at the paper. The termination date. The legal phrasing. The hollow corporate apology. But mostly, she stared at the number that wasn't there. Her $2 million commission. The deal had closed 5 days earlier. The ink was dry. But the payout was still 2 weeks away. "You knew this would happen," she said quietly. Bryce finally looked at her. "It's just business." Business. That word echoed in her head as she cleared her desk. No farewell party. No formal goodbye. Just a few pitiful glances from junior associates and a whispered, "I'm so sorry," from Maya-chan in accounting. Elena kept her face calm. Inside, her chest burned. She drove home in silence. Her phone buzzed with a text. Damien Cross. "Dinner Wednesday to celebrate? My treat." He didn't know yet. He didn't know she had been cut loose by the company he'd just signed with. That she had been stripped of the commission that she had more than earned. That she had been discarded like a cost liability. She didn't respond. Not yet. Not until she had a plan. That night, Elena didn't sleep. She sat at her kitchen table with the city lights flickering through the window, and opened her contract folder, page after page, until she found it. The clause she needed. Rescission within 14 days. No penalty. If the client initiated it. A spark ignited in her. Bryce and Raymond had underestimated her. They saw a line item. A threat to budget. What they didn't see was the one thing that had actually secured the Orion deal. Her. Damien trusted her. She had been in his factory, his labs, met his engineers. She knew his kids' names, his favorite whiskey, the challenges his company faced. She had stayed up until 3 in the morning crafting custom pitch decks, and flown to San Francisco twice in the same week, just to win over his board. He hadn't signed with Nexera. He had signed with Elena. As she closed the contract folder, her mind was already building the next move. But what she didn't know was that behind closed doors, at that very moment, Bryce and Raymond were already celebrating. They had structured the firing for a Friday afternoon knowing HR would be gone. They were counting on her disappearing quietly. They believed Elena Marlowe, for all her loyalty and numbers, would never fight back. They had no idea what was coming. By the time she arrived at Lacoon, the upscale restaurant where she and Damien usually met, the storm had already begun to gather inside her. What happened next would send ripples through 3 companies, destroy reputations, ignite new ones, and change the balance of power in the optical tech world forever. And it all began with 5 words from Damien Cross that she would never forget. "Elena, you look like war." The restaurant was warm and familiar, but Elena felt none of it. She sat at their usual table in the corner of Lacoon, a place where deals had been toasted and promises sealed over glasses of aged wine. Damien arrived a few minutes late, shrugging off his coat, and immediately sensed the shift in her expression. He didn't smile this time. He studied her carefully. "Elena, you look like war." She gave a tired laugh. "It's been a strange week." He tilted his head. Something happened at Nexera? She didn't respond right away. Instead, she poured him a glass of the Cabernet he liked. She waited for the waiter to retreat before speaking. I was let go on Friday. Effective immediately. Official reason, departmental restructuring. Damien froze. The glass never made it to his lips. You're kidding. I wish I were. And the Orion deal? Signed. Finalized. Commission unpaid. That's why I'm here. Damien's jaw tightened. He set the glass down with deliberate care. They cut you to avoid the payout. Elena nodded. They knew exactly what they were doing. For a long moment, silence hung between them. Only the low hum of other diners filled the space. Then Damien leaned forward. What do you need from me? She reached into her handbag and slid a folder across the table. The contract. Page 9. Clause 13. 14-day rescission window, no penalties. He opened the folder, scanned the clause and exhaled. You want me to cancel? I'm not asking you to, she said. I'm just making sure you have all the information. What you choose to do is your call. He looked at her, and she knew he understood everything in that moment. Not just the betrayal, but the stakes. The hours she had invested. The relationship they'd built. The faith she'd earned. I assume someone's already reached out to you. Elena hesitated. Aurelia Systems. Damien gave a low whistle. Celine Hartman has good instincts. You'd be an asset there. I haven't said yes yet. You should. They'll give you autonomy. And they've been working on something interesting. New sensor array tech, more adaptable, better for aerospace. Exactly, she said. Better fit for Orion's expansion roadmap than Nexera's cookie-cutter solution. Damien picked up his phone. Harold, he said to his legal counsel. I need you to pull our contract with Nexera. Look at clause 13. We're within rescission range. I want to explore withdrawal options. Also, clear my morning. I'll need to speak to their executive team. When he hung up, he fixed Elena with a steady gaze. You didn't deserve this. She blinked away a swell of emotion. It's not about deserving. It's about doing what's right. Then let's do it. That night, Elena drove home in the dark, headlights casting shadows on the wet pavement. Her heart thudded in her chest, not with fear, but something sharper. Determination. This wasn't about revenge. It was about correction. About sending a message that integrity mattered. That trust had value. That people like Bryce and Raymond couldn't keep playing games with people's lives without consequences. By the next morning, her phone began ringing. First it was Bryce. She let it go to voicemail. Then Raymond. Another missed call. Finally, at 8:17 a.m., her screen lit up again. She answered. Elena, Bryce said, his voice clipped and shaky. We need to talk. Immediately. I'm not an employee anymore, remember? Elena, Orion canceled their contract. Damien Cross personally called Lowell. What did you do? I told the truth. He didn't speak. Then, quieter. We'd like to offer you your role back. Better compensation. Full reinstatement. I've already accepted another offer, she said calmly. You can't do that. Your non-compete is invalid after termination without cause. Page 4. Paragraph 3. I reviewed it with legal. The silence stretched. Elena, this is going to blow up. Then you'd better brace for impact. She hung up. As the days unfolded, Aurelia Systems welcomed her like a storm. Celine Hartman, composed and sharp-eyed, greeted her at headquarters with a firm handshake. Welcome to Aurelia, Elena. We move fast here. I hope you're ready. I'm not just ready, Elena said. I'm loaded. And she was. With data. With insight. With every lesson Nexera had taught her, about greed, loyalty, and underestimation. In a sleek conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows and a skyline view of Seattle, Celine briefed her executive team. Orion Labs has terminated their deal with Nexera. Elena Marlowe will now lead our proposal. We have a 4-day window to win them over. Let's make it count. The room buzzed with energy. Elena opened her laptop. Her screen lit up with specs, strategy, and the start of a campaign that would shift the entire market. The war had begun. But the next battle would be fought in the boardroom. And Elena wasn't walking in alone. She was bringing fire. Elena stood at the head of the Aurelia Systems strategy room, a whiteboard behind her already filled with specs, timelines, and pricing comparisons. The Orion opportunity had moved from a recovery mission to a full-scale offensive. And Elena wasn't just pitching. She was orchestrating a takeover. Celine Hartman, Aurelia's CEO, watched her with a calm intensity. "What's the advantage here?" "Speed and customization," Elena replied. Nexera sold Orion a standard package. "We're going to deliver a tailored solution with built-in adaptability, longer warranty, lower failure rate, less integration cost." The engineers nodded. The CFO raised a brow. "We can't go too low on the pricing." "We won't," Elena said. "We'll beat them with value, not desperation." By Tuesday afternoon, the Aurelia team had crafted a bold new proposal. A $2.5 million package that not only matched Orion's current expectations, but anticipated their upcoming expansion into satellite calibration systems. The timeline was aggressive, but executable. The integration plan? Seamless. The optics? Industry best. Elena sent a message to Damien's assistant. The proposal would be ready by Thursday. He confirmed a slot, Wednesday noon. Then came the twist. At 11:30 Wednesday morning, as the Aurelia team packed up samples and prepared to head to Orion's headquarters, Elena's phone buzzed with a new text. The number was unfamiliar, but the content was unmistakable. "Elena, it's Daniel. I'm using Maya's phone. Urgent, Bryce is at Orion. Pitching a 30% discount and full implementation support. They're panicking." Elena's stomach dropped. "They're trying to undercut us with price," she muttered. Celine, already in her blazer and heels, looked at her. "Can we still win this?" "If we get in there now," Elena replied. "And remind them what integrity looks like." They drove through downtown traffic like fire on wheels. At Orion's front desk, the receptionist hesitated when Elena gave her name, then nodded. Mr. Cross left instructions. "Conference room B." When they entered, the room was already occupied. Damien sat at the head of the table, his face unreadable. Beside him sat Bryce Kettering and Raymond Lowell. Nexera's last gamble. Bryce turned. "We were under the impression this was a private meeting," he said coldly. "I invited both parties," Damien said without looking at him. "I make decisions with all the facts on the table." Elena stepped forward, calm and focused. She introduced Celine and the Aurelia team with practiced confidence. Then she opened her folder and placed it neatly beside Damien. "We're here to present an alternative," she said. "A solution built not just to match expectations, but to surpass them." For the next 40 minutes, the room was a battleground of ideas. Bryce pitched slash pricing, free implementation, bonus upgrades. Elena countered with customization, long-term viability, and an unmatched team of specialists. Nexera's presentation was a plea. Aurelia's was a promise. Damien asked questions, precise and clinical. No emotion. No favoritism. Elena knew better than to interpret his silence. When the meeting ended, Damien stood. "Thank you both. I'll need to consult with my board before we proceed." Outside in the parking lot, Bryce cornered Elena near her car. "You're making a mistake," he hissed. "I think you already made it for me," she said. "Firing me 2 weeks before payout. That's not strategy. That's fear." His eyes narrowed. "You won't get away with this." Elena leaned in, calm as stone. "I'm not getting away with anything. I'm standing where you dropped the ball and picking it up." Back at Aurelia headquarters, Celine gave Elena a quiet nod. "You handled that well." "It's not over," Elena said. "He's not above going to the board directly, or pulling personal favors." "Then we stand taller," Celine replied. "You've already won the room. Now we wait." 2 days passed in a haze of meetings and quiet dread. Elena slept in short intervals, replaying every sentence of the presentation in her mind. She kept her phone nearby, waiting. Friday, 3:57 p.m. Her phone lit up. Damien Cross. She answered, barely breathing. "We've made our decision," he said. A pause. No build-up. No small talk. I'd like you to come in. 4 p.m. sharp. Elena walked into Orion Labs, a folder in her hand, her heart steady. The receptionist waved her through. She was escorted to the executive boardroom. But this time Nexera wasn't there. Just Damien. And 6 members of the Orion senior team. Please, he said, gesturing to the head seat. Elena sat. Straight-backed. Alert. Damien looked at his colleagues. Then back at her. You presented a solution that aligned with our mission. You answered every technical challenge. But more than that, you reminded us that relationships still matter. He extended his hand. We're going with Aurelia. The air left her lungs in a single silent breath. Then came the words she'd been holding back for weeks. You won't regret it. He smiled. I know. You'll be personally overseeing implementation, I trust? From day one. The meeting ended with contracts drafted and champagne quietly offered. Elena declined the glass. There would be time for celebration later. In the elevator, her phone buzzed again. Maya-chan. Office is chaos. Raymond and Bryce are losing it. Emergency board call scheduled. Half the floor is whispering your name. Elena smiled. The war wasn't just over. It had flipped the entire battlefield. By Monday morning, whispers had turned into roars. The news of Orion Labs awarding their contract to Aurelia Systems wasn't just a blow to Nexera, it was a cannonball to the chest. Across LinkedIn, private Slack channels, and trade forums, one name was echoing with every refresh: Elena Marlowe. Inside Nexera's glossy glass tower, the atmosphere was far from sterile professionalism. Tension buzzed in the elevators. Entire sales teams sat in meetings that felt more like interrogations. Rumors said Bryce Kettering hadn't been seen on the executive floor since Friday. And Raymond Lowell? His office door remained shut all day, blinds drawn. Maya-chan sent Elena a voice memo that morning. Greg from finance just walked out. Literally packed up his desk in 10 minutes. Said he can't work under people who burn their own top talent for profit. Elena sat at her new corner office at Aurelia, the city skyline reflected in the window behind her. A steaming mug of coffee sat beside her contract binder. Her team was already preparing implementation logistics for Orion. It wasn't just about the win anymore. Now it was about delivering something better than even Damien had imagined. Celine stepped in, her expression unreadable, holding her tablet. You're going to want to see this, she said. On the screen was a trade news headline. Nexera loses flagship client in blow to Q2 forecast. CEO faces internal board review. Below it, an article detailed the fallout. Nexera's stock had dropped nearly 12% since Friday. 2 senior account directors had resigned over the weekend. Investors were panicking, and insiders had begun questioning Bryce's and Raymond's handling of strategic personnel. Celine sat across from Elena, her voice calm. Congratulations, she said. I didn't do this to destroy them. You didn't. They did this to themselves. Elena nodded slowly. She hadn't sought revenge. She had simply refused to let dishonesty win. What Bryce and Raymond had underestimated was not her technical skill, but her patience, her planning, her ability to leverage truth. Later that afternoon, her phone rang again. Gregory Hansen, Nexera's chairman. She didn't answer. Moments later, a voicemail dropped. Elena, this is Gregory Hansen. I want to personally apologize. Bryce, acted without full board review. His decision to terminate you before commission payout was never authorized at the executive level. I'd like to discuss a return. Full reinstatement. Matching whatever Aurelia is offering and more. We need your leadership. Elena let the message finish. Then she deleted it without hesitation. Some doors, once closed, weren't worth opening again. She turned back to her desk, flipping open the final Orion onboarding document. Her implementation team was already ahead of schedule. Damien had approved the timeline with minimal revisions. The trust was real. The momentum, irreversible. But the ripple effects were only beginning. By Wednesday, Celine received another call. Bedford Analytics, an aerospace client worth nearly $2 million annually, wanted to discuss transitioning from Nexera to Aurelia. They heard about Orion, Celine said, stepping into Elena's office. And they don't trust Raymond's leadership anymore. Elena raised an eyebrow. Bedford's been with Nexera for 7 years. Not anymore, Celine said. Every decision Nexera had made in the name of saving money was now costing them everything. And still, Bryce tried one final play. Late Thursday night, a new message arrived on Elena's personal email. The subject line read, "One last offer." She opened it. It was from Bryce. A desperate, winding paragraph trying to justify his decision, blaming pressure from the board, shifting forecasts, a misread on risk. Then came the offer. An executive-level re-entry, full control of her previous accounts, even equity consideration. Elena didn't reply. Instead, she forwarded the message to Celine. Subject line, "For your amusement." By Friday, Bryce Kettering was placed on indefinite administrative leave. Raymond Lowell stepped down as CEO under strategic reorganization. The board installed interim leadership. But the damage was done. Elena walked into a packed strategy summit at Aurelia, leading the presentation with calm authority. Her new team had doubled in size. The Orion rollout was projected to finish 3 weeks ahead of schedule. Bedford had signed a letter of intent. After the meeting, Celine pulled her aside. "Damien's flying in next week. He wants to discuss an expanded contract, new divisions, possibly a global rollout." Elena's lips curved. "Then we'd better be ready." Outside, the autumn wind swept leaves across the courtyard of Aurelia's headquarters. She stood beneath the silver Aurelia logo etched in stone above the doors. This place was hers now. Not by luck, but by choice. By fight. By truth. And the storm she had weathered was now part of her legend. It was still dark when Elena arrived at her mother's care facility. The sky outside was washed in soft navy, with only the faintest hint of dawn climbing over Seattle's skyline. Inside, the hall smelled of clean linen and warm oatmeal. The nurses greeted her with gentle nods. By now, they all knew who she was. Her mother sat in the lounge by the window, a blanket draped across her lap, a book resting in her hands. When she saw Elena, her eyes lit up. "There's my girl," she said with a smile that could melt the hardest day. Elena leaned in to hug her. "You're up early." "So are you," her mother replied. "Which means something big just happened. Or is about to." Elena chuckled. "Maybe both." She didn't mention Nexera's downfall, or the millions in new business Aurelia had secured, or the fact that she now held the keys to some of the industry's most prestigious accounts. Instead, she sat beside her mother and updated her on the things that mattered most. A new specialist joining the staff, her upgraded physical therapy program, a fresh round of tests showing better than expected progress. Afterwards, as they sat sipping weak coffee and listening to soft jazz playing through the hallway speakers, her mother looked over and said, "You're lighter. Lighter. There's something different about you. It's like you've finally put down a weight you've been carrying for years." Elena considered it. Maybe her mother was right. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't living for quarterly targets or corporate approval. She wasn't constantly guarding her back from office politics or boardroom betrayals. She was building something real. On her terms. That afternoon, back at Aurelia headquarters, she was greeted with another piece of news. 3 more clients had scheduled discovery calls. All had previously been Nexera exclusives. Celine stepped into Elena's office holding a slim leather-bound folder. "You've become our best brand ambassador without even saying a word in public." "I haven't done anything special." "You've done exactly what matters," Celine said. "You've delivered. And you've done it without noise." Later that evening, Elena attended her first executive mixer since joining Aurelia. It was held at a penthouse downtown, filled with city leaders, venture capitalists, and executives from rival firms. As she stepped off the elevator, glasses clinked, suits rustled, and conversations hummed beneath the sparkle of chandeliers. Someone noticed her almost immediately. "Elena Marlowe." A voice called from across the room. It was Grant Whitmore, one of Nexera's former regional directors who had jumped ship just last month. He walked over, glass in hand, eyes wide with admiration. "You've become something of a legend." "I don't believe in legends," Elena replied lightly. He laughed. "Then believe in outcomes." Word is Nexera is scrambling to stop the bleeding. Meanwhile, you've built a net of loyalty that money can't buy. More guests approached. Some to offer congratulations. Others to ask subtle questions about Aurelia's onboarding process. A few, quietly, asked if her team had room for seasoned professionals seeking escape from collapsing environments. By the time she left the event, her phone buzzed again. A message from Damien Cross. Team says onboarding is flawless. Ahead of schedule. Under budget. Dinner next week to celebrate. Elena typed her reply with a faint smile. Absolutely. First round's on me. The elevator doors closed behind her. Down below, the city sparkled with a quiet kind of fire. The kind that doesn't scream for attention, but burns with something stronger than applause. Purpose. She drove home in silence. Not the heavy kind she had known during those final weeks at Nexera. This silence was earned. It was the hush that follows a storm, when the earth is still, and everything begins to grow again. Her apartment smelled faintly of eucalyptus and old wood. She opened the windows, let the cool autumn air sweep in, and changed into her favorite hoodie, worn soft real. Then she sat on her couch, legs tucked beneath her, laptop open. She had a team to grow, new contracts to shape, and for the first time, the power to choose her own future. This wasn't the peak. It was only the foundation. And somewhere inside her, Elena knew. The world hadn't seen anything yet. Monday began with silence. Not the absence of noise, but the kind that comes before something big. Elena arrived at the office early, her coffee still steaming, her inbox already waiting. The subject lines spoke for themselves. Inquiry, transition from Nexera. Meeting request, confidential. Exploratory discussion, Bedford referral. She clicked through, eyes scanning fast. Executives, procurement officers, engineering leads, all reaching out, not just to talk, but to move. Nexera's exodus had begun. At 9:15 sharp, Celine walked in holding her tablet like a scalpel. 3 more clients reached out over the weekend, she said. All quietly, all serious. They don't trust what's left of Nexera's leadership. Elena nodded, tapping notes on her own screen. They shouldn't. Nexera was built on repetition, not relationships. Now the pattern's breaking. Celine arched an eyebrow. You ready to scale your team? I already started, Elena replied. Daniel Ruiz. Remember him? Celine's lips curved. The one who warned you about Bryce. He's in. Accepted the offer this morning. Starts next week. A quiet, knowing smile passed between them. Elena wasn't just salvaging clients. She was assembling something new. A team that understood what mattered. Later that day, she met Daniel at a cafe near the waterfront. He looked better than she remembered. Freer, like someone finally breathing clean air again. You sure you're ready for this? Elena asked as he stirred his coffee. I stayed at Nexera 2 months longer than I should have, he replied. But now I know exactly what kind of company I want to help build. She slid a printed onboarding packet across the table. Good. We're not just selling solutions anymore. We're setting standards. Back at Aurelia, the momentum picked up speed. Bedford Analytics officially signed on Thursday. Then came VoxelCore. Then Syntrax. Within 2 weeks, 5 major accounts had transitioned from Nexera to Aurelia, with 3 more in contract finalization. It wasn't a wave, it was a migration. But it wasn't just about losses and wins. It was about perception. One morning, as Elena arrived at her office, her assistant handed her a printout of a newly published industry article. How Aurelia Systems quietly claimed the market. A case study in relationship capital. Elena skimmed it. The story wasn't just accurate, it was poetic. It didn't glorify revenge. It celebrated strategy, integrity, trust. There was no mention of Nexera by name, but everyone knew. Later that week, as she finished a client onboarding call, a name appeared on her phone she hadn't seen in months. Raymond Lowell. She let it ring. A voicemail arrived within a minute. Elena, this is Raymond. I wanted to personally extend an apology. Bryce's termination should have come much sooner. The board agrees. I know we've lost key clients, but there's still time to rebuild. I'd like to meet. Just a conversation. Elena deleted the message. No response was the only response he deserved. That Friday evening, she stood on her apartment balcony, watching the city breathe beneath her. The lights, the hum of traffic, the rhythm of a world still spinning. And her phone buzzed again. This time it was her mother. "Doctor says I might be discharged by Christmas." Elena smiled, her eyes stinging with quiet gratitude. That had been the goal from the start. Not titles. Not revenge. Just the ability to care. To make sure the people she loved didn't suffer because of someone else's greed. Her career had taken a turn. But so had her purpose. Inside, her laptop chimed with a meeting reminder. Monday. Damien Cross. Expansion review. Potential international partnership. She sipped her tea and turned back inside. The doors weren't just knocking anymore. They were wide open. And Elena was standing in the center of them all, unshaken. By the second month, it was no longer a ripple. It was a shockwave. Industry newsletters, corporate Slack threads, and procurement summits were all buzzing with the same undercurrent. Aurelia Systems had cracked the formula. Not just for product delivery, but for loyalty. Elena wasn't chasing clients anymore. They were chasing her. At the quarterly Aerotech Innovation Forum, she was scheduled to speak for 15 minutes during a breakout session on adaptive optics integration. She ended up with a packed ballroom, standing room only, as late arrivals clustered near the exits, phones raised to record her. She spoke plainly, without showmanship. "It's not enough to deliver on specs," she said. "We have to deliver on promises. Because the tech we sell might live in a lab, but the trust we build lives in boardrooms, lives on factory floors, and sometimes lives in the quiet decisions made when no one's watching." The room erupted in applause. Afterward, as she made her way through the crowd, executives she had never met stopped her mid-step. They offered cards, invitations, quiet praise. "Your name's on every shortlist now," Celine whispered later that evening over drinks. "Every speaking engagement. Every advisory panel." "I'm not looking for spotlight," Elena said. "You're not. But it's chasing you anyway." Back at Aurelia HQ, her team had grown from 5 to 15. Daniel Ruiz had taken over West Coast client development. Maya Chen had joined as senior accounts controller. And the onboarding specialist from Bedford? Now full-time, managing 2 new transition teams. Elena sat in the conference room on a rainy Tuesday morning, scanning the whiteboard filled with upcoming deadlines. It was no longer about what she'd escaped from. It was about what she was building. Still, she couldn't ignore the lingering echoes from the past. Nexera had gone almost silent. Their leadership page now featured unfamiliar names. Raymond Lowell's profile was gone. Bryce's LinkedIn had gone dark. An insider blog post hinted at a pending lawsuit from a former employee citing wrongful termination and retaliation. No names were listed, but the timing spoke volumes. Then came the message. From someone she hadn't expected. Damien Cross. But this time not a text. A personal invitation. Aurelia Systems has been shortlisted for an international procurement contract with Orion's European expansion. You're invited to present. Berlin. Next quarter. ***. Celine read the message aloud in the strategy meeting. "Looks like we're going global." Elena folded her hands. "Then let's bring the same focus, the same team. We didn't win Orion with gimmicks. We won it with proof." As the room broke into preparation buzz, she sat back and let herself absorb it. Just 2 months ago, she had been forced out of a company she helped grow. Now she was being invited to present on a global stage as the trusted voice of a rising industry leader. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like redefinition. Weeks passed. Then one evening, as she locked her office door and headed to the elevator, she saw a man standing by the lobby glass wall. A familiar figure. Shoulders slightly slumped. Suit sharp, but too formal for the relaxed energy of Aurelia. Bryce Kettering. He turned when he noticed her, hesitated, then approached. "Elena." She said nothing. "I didn't come here to argue," he said. "I came to acknowledge what you've done. You won." She looked at him, truly looked. He seemed smaller now. Not in size, but in weight. The weight of command stripped away. "I didn't do it to win," she replied. I did it because it was right. Bryce gave a bitter smile. That's why you beat me. She didn't respond. He glanced around the bright, modern lobby. Aurelia's becoming what Nexera was supposed to be. If I had seen that sooner. But you didn't, Elena said softly. I know. He turned to go, then stopped. Do you ever miss it? She paused. The work? No. The people? Sometimes. The feeling of being underestimated? Never. She walked past him, each step steady, never looking back. That night, she stood in her apartment, watching the lights flicker along the water. Somewhere across town, Bryce was probably still wondering how it had all slipped through his fingers. But Elena wasn't thinking about him anymore. She was already preparing for Berlin. Because momentum, once earned through integrity, didn't slow down. It accelerated. Berlin in March was crisp and gray. The sky suspended with soft clouds that threatened rain but never quite delivered. Elena stepped out of the black car at the base of the Orion Global Headquarters, its sleek architecture a monument to innovation. The chrome facade reflected her like a mirror, poised, ready, and no longer just a regional player. Inside, the conference floor buzzed with controlled energy. Representatives from 5 major firms had been invited to pitch solutions for Orion's European expansion. But only one name held quiet dominance in every whispered hallway conversation: Aurelia Systems. Elena walked the floor with Celine at her side. Their presentation wasn't for another 3 hours, but they were already being observed. Eyes followed them. Introductions came quickly. Some cold, others respectful. Rivals had learned. Elena Marlowe wasn't here by accident. She had arrived through fire. When it was their turn, the Aurelia team took the stage with quiet authority. No dramatic visuals. No empty promises. Just precision. Elena opened the presentation with the same grounded tone that had earned her trust months before in Seattle. Our proposal isn't just about product, she said. It's about people. Stability. Adaptability. And the kind of relationship that doesn't waver under pressure. She moved through integration models, warranty projections, and logistical timelines with practiced clarity. Celine highlighted data from the successful North American rollout. The rest of the team fielded engineering questions with calm expertise. By the time they stepped down, the room was silent with focus. Then came the closed-door session. Damien Cross stood at the head of the long conference table. His expression gave away nothing. He motioned to the others to wait outside. Only Elena remained. When the door clicked shut, he spoke. Tell me something not in the slides, he said. Why should I trust Aurelia with our European future? Elena didn't blink. Because we already proved we won't cut corners. Because when you gave me a handshake, I honored it, after my former employer didn't. And because we've already executed the impossible once. We'll do it again. Damien nodded slowly. And you? Are you staying for the long haul? I'm building something here, Elena said. I didn't take this path to be temporary. He studied her for a moment, then extended his hand. Welcome to Phase 2. The handshake was firm, not ceremonial, binding. Back at the hotel, Elena removed her heels and stood by the window. Below, Berlin's skyline glimmered in quiet amber. Her phone vibrated on the table. A message from Maya. 2 more clients asked about onboarding. I think they saw the Berlin photos. She smiled, typing a short reply. Tell them to call Monday. We'll be ready. Across the room, her laptop pinged. A message from Daniel. Big congratulations. But guess who just updated their profile? Bryce. Freelance consultant. Looking for opportunities. Elena read it twice. Then closed the screen. Let the past chase its own shadow. She lay back on the couch, letting the sounds of the city swirl through the slightly cracked window. In the quiet, her mind was already working. Not about the next deal, but the next structure. Elena no longer wanted to just land clients. She wanted to build platforms, create mentorship pipelines, change the way future sales teams were formed, not around desperation, but around trust. Berlin wasn't the end of her story. It was the moment the world outside of her country finally saw her for what she had always been. A leader born in silence, forged in dismissal, and now rising city by city. The flight home from Berlin was quiet, smooth, and strangely emotional. Elena sat by the window, watching clouds shift below like slow-moving rivers. She had traveled across continents, not just physically but professionally. The weight of what she was building felt different now. Bigger than numbers, bigger than contracts. It felt like something that would outlive her. At SeaTac, her return was met not by fanfare, but by clarity. Daniel picked her up in a modest black sedan. As they pulled away from the curb, he handed her a manila folder. "What's this?" Elena asked. "A letter. From the board of Nexera." She opened it slowly. The contents were predictable. An acknowledgement of past mistakes, mention of Bryce's full termination, an invitation to consult on a culture shift, and a vague promise of ethical recalibration. She folded it once and slipped it back in. "Not interested? I'm not in the business of fixing what they broke on purpose." Daniel didn't press. He knew. Back at Aurelia, the atmosphere was electric. A banner hung near the entrance. "Welcome home, Elena." Her team had gathered in the main conference hall, not for a party, but for planning. The Berlin contract was now official. Orion's expansion would begin in under 3 weeks. New divisions. New regions. New challenges. And Elena? She wasn't just the architect anymore. She was the cornerstone. Celine stood at the front, her voice carrying the weight of what had just been achieved. "We've entered a new chapter," she said. "Not because we won the biggest deal, but because we did it the right way. Elena has reminded us all what leadership looks like." The room erupted in applause. Elena raised a hand to quiet them. "We're just getting started." After the meeting, she returned to her office and stared at the city skyline. It no longer intimidated her. It welcomed her. Below the skyline sat countless companies, teams, clients, some fading, some growing. And Aurelia was becoming the benchmark. Later that week, her mother was discharged from the care facility. Elena had arranged a quiet apartment just outside the city with an on-call nurse, and every amenity she could ask for. Her mother stepped into the living room, eyes wide with disbelief. "You didn't have to do all this," she said. "I did," Elena replied softly. "Because now I can." They shared dinner that night at the kitchen table, just the two of them. No champagne. No corporate speeches. Just warm food, soft laughter, and a kind of peace Elena had never known. Afterward, she opened her laptop at the dining table. Her fingers hovered over the keys. A new document. Blank. At the top, she typed, "Sales redefined. Building loyalty in the age of disruption." A book? A course? A keynote series? She didn't know yet. But the words were there, waiting to be shaped, just like everything else she had touched since the day Nexera tried to erase her. The next morning, her assistant forwarded an internal report from a major analyst firm. Aurelia Systems projected to surpass Nexera Dynamics in market valuation within 6 months. There was no need to celebrate. No victory lap. Elena just got to work. She walked the office floor, greeting new hires, listening to feedback, checking in on integration updates. At one point, she paused by the onboarding room, where 2 fresh hires sat nervously awaiting orientation. She stepped inside. "I'm Elena," she said. "Let me tell you how we do things around here." They listened, wide-eyed, uncertain. But as she spoke, something shifted. Not because of her title. Not because of her resume. But because they could feel it. She wasn't building an empire. She was shaping a legacy. One conversation at a time. Spring came to Seattle like a quiet revelation. The rain grew lighter, the mornings brighter, and the rhythm of the city softened into something more forgiving. Elena walked through the doors of Orion Labs headquarters not as a guest, but as a partner. The reception staff greeted her by name. Engineers nodded as she passed. Her presence was no longer surprising, it was expected. In Conference Room 1, the final implementation review for the North American division was underway. Damian Cross sat at the head of the table, flanked by his leadership team. Elena stood beside the screen, going over system integrations, cost savings, projected efficiencies. By the end of the hour, Damian closed his tablet and leaned back. "This has been the smoothest rollout in our company's history," he said. "Under budget. Ahead of schedule. And more importantly, without a single broken promise. Elena didn't smile. She didn't need to. She only nodded once, deeply. As the meeting ended and the executives filed out, Damien lingered. "You remember our first dinner?" he asked, his voice quieter now. "Rooftop lounge. Cabernet. You said if we delivered, I'd have a legacy deal. And you delivered. Twice." Elena turned to the window, gazing out at the distant skyline. "Back then, it was just about hitting my numbers. Earning that commission. But now," she looked at him, "now it's about building something that can't be taken away." He studied her face, then reached into his folder and handed her a sealed envelope. "What's this?" "Our next contract. Europe was phase 2. Asia Pacific is phase 3. We want Aurelia to lead it." She opened it slowly, scanning the figures. It was larger than anything they'd signed before. "We'll need more people," she said. "Then build your army." Later, as she stepped out into the soft sunlight, Elena took a long breath. Everything had begun with that one deal. The one Nexera tried to steal. The one they fired her for. The one that was supposed to break her. But it hadn't. Instead, it had become the catalyst. Back at Aurelia headquarters, she called a team-wide meeting. As the staff gathered, Elena took her place at the front. Not behind a podium, not with slides, just herself. "We're expanding," she announced. "New regions. New teams. Same principles. Integrity. Clarity. Commitment." She looked out over the group, some seasoned, some brand new, all watching her. "I won't always have time to say this," she continued. "But let me say it now. You're not here to push numbers. You're here to build trust. Everything else, contracts, clients, awards, comes from that." The room was still, focused. That night, as she packed her bag to leave, her assistant knocked softly and handed her a wrapped box. "There's no note," she said. "Just your name." Inside the box was a glass plaque. Engraved on it, "To Elena Marlowe, the one who made business human again." She held it in her hands for a long moment. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder that the deal they tried to steal had become a doorway, that the betrayal they thought would end her had been her beginning, and that everything she had built, every step, every sacrifice, had led to this quiet, powerful truth. She hadn't just changed companies. She had changed the game. Forever.